Why questions in part 1 look easy and they catch out good candidates? Because the obvious answer is usually true. Why did you choose your job? Money. Why do people move to cities? Work. Say the obvious thing on its own and you sound flat. Refuse to say it and you sound dishonest. The move is to say it first, on purpose, and then go somewhere better.
So the frame has 3 beats. Beat 1, concede, acknowledge the thing everybody would say, and admit it was part of it. Beat 2, pivot, that said, but for me, the real reason though. Beat 3, commit your actual position, with one specific detail attached. Concede, pivot, commit. About 25 seconds. And the first beat is the one almost nobody does, which is exactly why it works.
The connectives here are worth learning as a closed set, because under pressure, you want the shape to be automatic rather than invented.
To open the concession, granted, admittedly, to be fair, there's a fair argument that. To pivot back, that said, having said that, but for me, the thing is, to commit, the deciding factor was, or what actually swung it was. Then 2 rows for childhood questions I used to, back then I'd always, and every Saturday my mother would. 8 phrases in the first 3 rows. Learn them properly, and you can run this structure on any why question in the exam without thinking about it. The concession vocabulary. Granted, which is short and slightly formal and lands well. Admittedly, which is softer. To be fair, which is the most conversational of the 3. Then the pivots, that said, and having said that. They mean the same thing and you should own one, not both. And the deciding factor was, which signals that you are about to say something considered rather than obvious. Now the childhood set. I used to for a habit that has stopped. Back then, for the time frame, we'd be at somewhere by some time for the repeated routine. I gave it up at 14, which is more precise than I stopped. Without much thought, which is honest and quietly interesting. And which sounds more impressive than it was. A lovely piece of self-deprecation that examiners rarely hear and always notice.
Now the grammar trap, and it is the single most common error on childhood questions. It is not a mistake of tense, it is a mistake of order.
There are 3 forms. Used to, for a habit that has stopped, I used to walk to school. Would, for repeated past habits. But only once the time frame is established, which is why would cannot be your first sentence. And past simple for single events. The mistake almost every candidate makes is opening with would. Every Saturday we would go to the pool, grammatically defensible, and it sounds unmoored, because nothing has told the listener which period we are in. Set the scene with used to, then switch to would, and you sound like a native narrating a childhood. The upgrades. Some people say becomes granted, or there's a fair argument that. But becomes that said, or having said that. The main reason becomes the deciding factor was. When I was young, I did becomes I used to, and then back then I'd always. And I stopped, becomes I gave it up at 14, without much thought, which is the same fact with a date, an age, and an attitude attached to it.
1 point on delivery, because these connectives only work if you let them breathe.
Listen, granted, pause. The money mattered. That said, pause. It wasn't the deciding factor. Both connectives sit on their own with a small break straight after. If you run them into the sentence, they disappear, and the contrast disappears with them. Give them their own beat and the examiner hears the architecture of your thinking, not just the content of it. That is a fluency and coherence mark, earned from 2 words and 2 small silences.
So, concede, pivot, commit, and set the scene before you use would. Let's put one together.
Why did you choose your job? Beat 1, concede. The honest answer most people give is money, and that was certainly part of it. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Beat 2, pivot. But for me, the deciding factor was something quite different. Beat 3, commit. It was the only offer where I'd be the least experienced person in the room, and I'd spent 2 years being the most experienced one. Notice that the third beat does not just state a reason, it shows you how the speaker thinks, and that is what gets remembered.
3 complete answers now. Read along and watch the concession do its work in each one.
Question 1. Why did you choose your job? The honest answer most people give is money, and to be fair, that was certainly part of it. But for me, the deciding factor was that it was the only offer where I'd be the least experienced person in the room, and I'd spent 2 years being the most experienced one, which teaches you nothing. Question 2. Did you play sport as a child? I used to swim competitively, which sounds more impressive than it was. Every Saturday we'd be at the pool by 6 and my mother would sit in a freezing gallery for 2 hours reading the same newspaper. I gave it up at 14 without much thought. Admittedly, I don't miss the swimming at all, but I think about that gallery quite a lot now. Question 3. Why do people enjoy living in cities? Granted, the obvious answer is jobs, and that's clearly a large part of it. That said, the people I know who love it here never mention work. What they mention is that you can change your mind at 9 at night and still find somewhere open, which sounds trivial until you've lived somewhere you can't.
So, concede the obvious answer, give the connective its own beat, set the scene with used to before you reach for would, and commit to one specific deciding factor. Your practice questions are below this video.